As composers, are we focusing on the right reasons to say yes to a project? For a lot of us, especially when we're first starting out, we immediately jump to the practical stuff. Are we getting paid fairly? What are the credits going to be like? What's the deadline? And yeah, these are really important questions to ask. But what if that focus is actually sabotaging our long-term happiness and a sustainable career as a composer? If you're not working on projects that you actually enjoy, then that's easily going to lead you to burnout in your career. A few weeks ago, I was in a ThinkSpace education webinar with games composer Austin Wintory, and someone asked him that very question: what makes you say yes to a project? And Austin had an amazing breakdown of his approach that's based on 3 main factors that go into his decision. Point number 1 is the connection with people. This might sound simple enough, maybe even obvious at first, but Austin says that this one factor alone makes up about 75% of his decision. Think about the times you've had just amazing collaborations, the times that you felt heard, you were creatively energized, and you were just genuinely excited for the project. That kind of environment has a huge impact on your intrinsic motivation to work. I found an article from the Harvard Business Review that says positive working relationships directly boost productivity and overall job satisfaction. And that makes a lot of sense. As someone who is extremely introverted, I like to connect with people who I connect with. For me, that means providing support for one another, taking responsibility for mistakes, inspiring one another, and really emphasizing the meaningfulness of the project. If we can do that, then I know for a fact that this is a person who I want to work with. The reality is, no matter how you view yourself, if you're introverted, extroverted, that doesn't really matter, because we thrive on connecting with like-minded people. This leads to better communication, it helps build trust, and ultimately it leads to a better final product. And even if the project itself is creatively challenging, having that strong collaborative relationship can be the difference between an exhausting versus fulfilling project. And remember, this isn't about just always being nice or always trying to appease the other person. We're just developing a mutual connection, we're showing empathy, and we're expressing that, yeah, we're willing to solve problems together. So when you do find that potential collaborator, your decision is pretty much made up at that point. Now, point number 2 is creative enjoyment. This is closely related to the first one, but Austin says that this is gonna make up about 20% of the decision. Composing takes time, it takes energy, and it takes a ton of your creativity. We touched on this at the beginning of the video, but if you're pouring all of this energy into a project that you're not even excited about, then you might start to feel drained, you might start to feel some resentment, and ultimately this leads to burnout. Now, take that and add on that you don't even feel a connection with your collaborators. I can almost guarantee that you're gonna face ongoing problems, you're gonna feel this weight on your shoulders, and honestly, you might just be excited for the project to end. Now, let's say that this isn't your ideal project. It's not necessarily something that you're even excited about, but your collaborators are incredible. Then you might consider taking the project on. And that's something that Austin actually mentioned, that so long as point 1 is checked off, something that's 75% of the decision, then he might actually say yes to the project. Now, of course, the goal is to find work that you actually enjoy. There's gonna be revisions, there's gonna be creative roadblocks, but you know that that's part of the process. But if the core concept of the project actually resonates with you, then I think that's gonna make all of those challenges much easier to handle. There's a Forbes article that points out just how important it is to find joy in what you do. In fact, it says you should actually expect to enjoy your work. It's good for your mental health, your focus, and the overall longevity of your career. Remember, your creative enjoyment is definitely a key factor to saying yes to a project, but like we said, it's not the only factor. Make sure that you kind of reflect, you take inventory, and you consider who you're working with, why you're doing it, and this is gonna lead me to point number 3. This is gonna be the logistics. And Austin puts this as the final 5% of the decision. This is because if the people are amazing, point number 1, and you feel some sort of creative spark for the project, that's point number 2, then all of that practical stuff can usually be sorted out pretty easily. And like we pointed out, all the logistics can kind of cover the pay structure, your deadlines, revisions, and everything in between. And to a lot of composers and creatives, this might feel like the number 1 thing to focus on. First, I want to point out that that's fair. If you're trying to make a career from your music, then the income is incredibly important. Does the job fit with your needs? Does the project fall in line with your schedule? Can you actually pay your bills? Now, notice that I'm not saying to jump from a full-time or part-time job directly into composing without some sort of transition period or backup. We all have different financial situations and factors that need to be considered when we're looking at our own careers. But what I am saying is that you should set up boundaries and guardrails for yourself as you move closer and closer to your ideal career. By focusing too much on the practical side of the gig, are you allowing yourself space to consider the importance of who you choose to collaborate with or the creative enjoyment of the project? If this particular gig isn't gonna single-handedly pay your rent, but everything else about it is a yes, consider, can your budget handle a dip this month for something that could be incredible to work on? Is gaining the experience and building your network worth a temporary financial trade-off? Notice how the focus is still whether the project aligns with your overall goals, not just that immediate dollar amount. I have found from my own personal experience that all three of these factors have come into play in some shape or form, but I found that when the first two are checked off and I'm actually working with people who appreciate what I bring to the table, then negotiating is easy because there is a clear mutual benefit. The problem is that so many of us don't really know what it is we bring to the table in the first place. And that's why I put together the Composer Odyssey Index. This is a free personality assessment specifically designed for composers to not only discover their own strengths and where to double down, but to also know their areas for improvement. By reflecting on your personal strengths as a composer, you'll have a better understanding of which projects you might even want to take on. The idea is to help create and sustain a more aligned music career in the long term. Remember, this is absolutely free, so if you are interested in taking the assessment, I'll leave a link in the description down below. And if you did get value out of today's video, then please be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, happy composing.